Effectively, we've been in the game for a long, long time. You've actually probably worked with us before in that we power inventory media or inventory marketing technology for AutoTrader, Cars.com, Edmunds.com, Jumpstart Network, all sorts of different folks. We're effectively helping them to, in a millisecond, adjust the inventory that we've got in our system to be able to show the right car to the right person. So we've been doing this a long time and having a lot of fun at it. And for this topic, we spoke with dealers to understand what it is that they're doing along the lines of marketing new, used, and CPO. And as you might expect, the emphasis that goes into new versus used and CPO is significantly more. Right? And you probably find that within your own organization. Who handles CPO specifically for their OEM here in the room? Right? And is there anyone from the OEM that doesn't handle CPO specifically? Can you put your hand up? Right? So you may find in your organization that the budget sizes and that sort of thing are different. Yet a lot of times the tactics, yes, this little scoff here in the front, very different. Okay, so the tactics end up being largely similar, and I'm here to help you with some ideas of different tactics that you can employ that align themselves more closely with pre-owned and actually enable you to speak to the consumer in the way that they're considering their buying decision, particularly around CPO. So a few numbers as to why you might want to do that, and actually it's interesting, NADA, of course, doesn't have a whole ton of numbers relative to CPO versus pre-owned. So these are new versus pre-owned numbers. But you can see, a lot of those pre-owned, of course, are CPO. You guys probably know the percentages of pre-owned that are CPO better than I do. And the gross margin is that much better. There's significant benefit to every store out there. You, I'm sure, have a lot of stores within your organizations or that you support from a business perspective that really have realized this very well, and they run their business heavily focused on pre-owned. There's quite a few. On the used car, of course, your immediate cash in pocket is effectively that much more effective or that much better. And just that retail net profit. So once that deal is done, right, you have to do so much more on the new side to be able to make a buck effectively. So there's lots of different things that you have to do to continue. You want to get that vehicle out in market. Whereas in CPO and pre-owned, right, you're immediately making dollars, right? And particularly with the programs that you've put together on the CPO side of things, you're assisting that dealer to make even more, to be even more effective with what it is that they're doing. And that's really our goal, right? We want to help them win. Of course, thereby, as the manufacturer, we win, everybody's happy. Okay, when you compare that net profit, it even continues along, whatever brand you're talking about. So whether it's domestic, imported, or luxury, right? It even gets more important when you're talking luxury to be focusing on these areas. To get some more specific kind of ideas from the consumer, it's nice that our friends over at Cox Media, they of course, or not Cox Media, Cox Automotive. We work with a lot of Cox. Kind of weird. Sorry. So when we go there, you look at the CPO vehicles, right? So on average, they're going to turn that much faster, right? So they're going to turn 5 days quicker. Therefore, you're going to turn more regularly. There's immediate benefit, right, to that dealer. So the other side of it is, peace of mind. When you go that route, we tend to, as marketers, promote the benefits that you're going to get from your program, right? So you're going to get that warranty, you're going to get that service package, you're going to get all those different things that you can get, and they're all very important. But what's interesting is the shopper is focused on inventory selection, right? Make, model, all that sort of stuff. They're focused on those pieces first. So when we look at that, right, the car is the star, right? Really, we hear it from our dealers a lot, and the dealers that work with us every day and have been with us for 4 years plus and that sort of thing, they totally understand that the car is the star. And that's what we're talking about today, putting that vehicle front and center. Because these are the criteria, right? So this is from that study from Cox Automotive. So these are the things, right? Body style, all the way down. And then we're considering, fourth, and then fifth, considering the other pieces. But those first things, that exciting aspect for the consumer, is the vehicle that they've been researching, the vehicle that they're excited about driving off the lot, right? Yet most of the time, when we talk about our CPO programs, we flip that. We do the inverse, right? And that, logically, right, doesn't make a ton of sense. So there's, it does in that it's difficult to do the alternative, right? It's difficult to communicate inventory, but it's getting easier for sure. So on the CPO side, right, the other aspect is we've got this new audience coming out. And I tend to make a lot of fun of folks talking about, ooh, millennials, and millennials are so different, and how do we treat millennials? And it's like, how did we treat Gen X? How do we treat boomers? How do we treat every generation? Every young generation brings new things into the marketplace, but everybody absorbs those things, right? So, you know, how many of you, you're millennial? You're holding an iPhone, you must be a millennial, right? Right? Any other millennials out here? You're working on your laptop like while watching a session millennial? No, oh, you're waiting for something to happen. That's worse than my Mac. Right on. Okay, so, you know, you get the idea, right? This millennial thing, it's, you know, great for getting speaking topics. You know, hey, we're going to talk about millennials. Oh, you can teach me how to work with millennials. That's fantastic. They're just new people. But what's cool in the stats, right, is that they actually place a little more value on CPO. Why do you think that is? You know, from my layperson perspective, you know, is it that they're more in tune with what CPO is? They get it? Or have they just been around marketing messages for a larger percentage of their life that it actually resonates more quickly, right? When you're considering someone who's 60, 65 and considering certified pre-owned, bruh, it's a new car or it's a used car. What are you talking about? Certified pre-owned. I don't even, what does that even mean? Okay? Well, these guys, all these dudes and dudettes on their tablets and mobile phones, right? They're sitting there saying, yeah, I get CPO, I understand that. And in fact, I was sitting yesterday for most of the day with one of my colleagues who's 25, a fantastic young man, who is looking for a CPO Audi, right? He wants to get that A3, and he's specifically looking for CPO because he's heard a lot and he's understood that that makes sense. So a nice piece of the puzzle for CPO is to get that into the thinking of that new consumer, right? Just because that message has been around a bit longer. So we've got the idea, right? Increase the pre-owned focus, increase the CPO focus, increase revenue, right? It's going to help. That's what we're propagating here. Okay, the consumer behavior is a little bit different as well, right? We've talked about this a lot. And actually, it's interesting. I've heard some recent studies that this is maybe inaccurate and actually increasing. So it's had a major dip, and it might be going up again. So keep an eye out for this. I'm very curious to see this data change. But they also, that consumer that's looking for a pre-owned vehicle knows what they want, and they need to know that that exists at the store, right? So when we talk about inventory marketing, right, we talk about helping people to see what's in the store. What do you have available? So that new buyer in market assumes that you do have that car, that you do have access to that car, right? Your CPO buyer assumes that you do not have that car, right? How could they possibly think that you've got that exact vehicle with all those specifications that you're looking for, particularly when you show them a branded message about a CPO program, right? The inspection that it goes through, the warranty that gets added onto it, all of those pieces of the puzzle that are absolutely valuable, but are they the right bait on the hook to get the consumer to come in and consider that option, right? Most people, as you've heard, and I'm sure, right, and I was talking about this stat yesterday in a lot of our meetings, only, I would say, about half the people in the marketplace know about certified pre-owned, and the communication back to me was, that's generous, and this is from CPO leaders, right? That is a bit generous. I'm a generous guy. I like to give things away. Actually, this is full of cookies that didn't get eaten yesterday, okay? So per my generosity, I'm going to set these at the back of the room because I also don't like to throw things away. I'm from the West Coast. You know, we have a lot of fun out there. We don't want to get rid of perfectly good food. And I know that, unfortunately, it was just going to go to waste. So there's cookies back there per that generosity. Right? So people are thinking along the lines of, should I not engage in this way, right? So you got to have that inventory at play in what you're doing. So typical digital marketing, right? We've got a lot of pieces of typical digital marketing here. So SEM doesn't typically focus on inventory. Non-branded keywords don't typically focus on inventory. SEO, the blog articles and all that sort of stuff, typically not focused on inventory. And when I say that, I don't mean a make and model. I mean at the VIN level, so the actual unit that you're trying to move. Okay, videos, same thing. Display, brand offers, right? You know, the typical display that you see at a market for CPO. When I go on to Moat, is everybody familiar with Moat? MOAT.com. It's a great way to go and see what other display campaigns are running in the marketplace. Okay, so you can compare and contrast with what you're doing, maybe get some ideas, all that sort of stuff. But I'll have you know, you won't see a ton of inventory display on Moat. We'll talk about that later. Facebook, right? Sponsored updates, not so focused on inventory. Now we're getting into carousel ads within Facebook, which is kind of exciting, okay? Which enable a focus on inventory. We'll talk about those. And listings, of course. So listings end up being that place, those endemic sites, right? Those spaces where you're going to promote those vehicles on such a regular basis. You want to make sure that people in the marketplace that are searching, and of course, you know, 65% of people go orange when they're going through that process to decide. You know, there's another percentage that go red and blue, another percentage that go purple, right? They're trying to figure out what they're doing. And yes, that's one or two or three spaces in the whole journey where people are typically looking at about 24, 25 different websites to make their decision. And then, that's only 5 to 15% of their month in total. When someone's searching for a vehicle, right, when someone's really focused on buying a car, yeah, they do research and they go on those endemic sites, and that's a great place to promote your inventory. But there's 95% other inventory all over the marketplace where if you're targeting people with data, if you're very intelligently focusing on those individuals who are looking for specific units, you can find them on a food blog. You can find them on an auto review site that you maybe didn't even know existed, right? There's all sorts of places to go and target these folks. So, again, as I mentioned, the assumption, new car's there. Go in, tell them what you want, tell them the specs. You might have to wait a couple weeks, but you're going to get that car, right? On the certified pre-owned, nope, not the case. So we're going to go through a few different ad types, right? A few different things that are available in market that you should maybe close the door on, that you should ensure that you do have as part of your mix, and that you should look at to win the game, right? The cool part about it is there's quite a few brands here in the room, right? We didn't shout out the brands, but there's quite a few folks here. Not everybody's going to try it, right? And it's kind of a fun thing, you know, when dealers get out, and they get out at our dealer conferences, and they talk about all the amazing things that they're doing in store. Sometimes their leadership, right, the marketing person goes and talks, the leadership is like, oh gosh, why are you giving them all our secrets? Well, most of the people in the audience aren't going to actually get off their duff and do it, right? So if you're considering this as an opportunity, jot it down and make sure you push yourself to take a shot. So the typical, you know, ad environment, an ad that simply states that you've got pre-owned inventory. This is on the dealer side, right? Okay, so these ads say, hey, I've got some cars. Y'all should come down and check them out. Okay, and that form of shopping is no longer active, right? On the CPO side, so I've got some cars and maybe a CPO program, and you should view the inventory. Okay, shop now. Right, but the messaging, you know, if I'm showing this to a consumer that has no interest in a TLX, right, I'm obviously not going to get their attention, right? And these hero shots, we've seen statistics after statistics to show that the consumer isn't so enamored with these beautiful ads as they once were, right? It's this banner blindness that sets in. Now we really have to push through with relevancy, okay? Ensuring that what we show that consumer is highly relevant to their known interests, right? And we can figure those things out. Okay, so something to add to the puzzle or make sure that you do have is into make, model, components, right? So when we're communicating our CPO programs in market, right, why not get into some evergreen content relative to CPO? And when I say evergreen, I mean you can, as a CDRJ store, say, or CDRJ program leader, you can go through and create ad content that are make model specific for each of those in the environment that you want to advertise in, okay? So whether it's in the Google world, right, and you can create all of these AdWords and set it up so that you're always running those programs. And you could actually set it up where, you know, you've got those programs running, and then, oh gosh, you've got a shortage of a particular unit. We'll pull that one off and put it back up later, right? All of these ebbs and flows in the marketplace can be handled by a few well-crafted evergreen programs, right? On the Facebook side of things, right, you can do the same sort of thing. And you can actually go in and choose make model, right? So that's kind of exciting, right? And most data management platforms in the marketplace today, whether it's from Google or Facebook or, you know, all sorts of other different folks with funny names like Kenshu and whatever else, they focus on multiple verticals, right? So the granularity that they're able to get to, the level of detail they're able to get to for a consumer, typically stops at make model, right? Here we're getting to make model in some trim level SI, which is fantastic, right? But make model year, new, used, vehicle condition, color, engine type, all those sorts of things, right? They don't typically go into that degree of granularity. So pros and cons, right? Pros side, pretty easy to set up those two formats, right? Working with your team or working yourself directly if you're in control of that area. It is a bit time consuming, right? But if you're creating evergreen content, right, evergreen type ads that you can turn on, turn off, pause and start, right, it's upfront time and it serves significant benefit thereafter. Okay, you may not always have the stock, so you have to deal with that, as we mentioned. Not necessarily scalable if you're dealing with many, many brands. So, you know, some of the folks at store level, you know, then sometimes need to get into that world where they have to deal with multiple brands and off-brand stuff. And doesn't necessarily, it doesn't work for off-brand, and it's getting more pricey. So the reality in the world of search engine marketing, and even Facebook is going to climb. In fact, customers of ours, very large customer down in Atlanta, spoke about how amazing it was to get into the Facebook game, but how quickly, you know, as they were throwing all sorts of money in it, how quickly that price was going up on that cost per click. And it's just supply and demand. It makes sense. So then there's the other need to have, right? And it's kind of a fun thing. There's a lot of folks that talk about, oh, you don't need to be there. You can do all that sort of stuff. And I tend to think, you know, kind of like my drinking and my yoga, everything in moderation, right? I'm not going to be like yogi all day long, and I'm not getting hammered every night, right? So I'm not going to totally abandon endemic sites, but do I need all of the additional pieces of the puzzle that I could add, right? Do I have to get all the spotlights? Do I have to get all the promotional ads? Do I have to get every one of their display solutions? By all means, continue to buy their dynamic inventory display solutions. Those are ours. No, but realistically, we, 4 or 5 years ago, steered our ship a little bit differently, knowing that this was changing. And we highly recommend that people avoid those additional spends there and focus on making sure your inventory is there, and then go and find your customers in other ways. So the pros and cons on these guys, right, aligns exactly with how the buyer wants to find pre-owned vehicles, right? They're going in and they're searching, and it's a safe place, right? You know, typically, even going on the manufacturer site, certainly going on a dealer site, it's not as safe for the consumer as going on a third-party aggregated site, right? And having a look around and saying, hey, you know, this is a safe place. I can look at a whole bunch of cars. It's all nice and happy. I'm not getting approached or whatever it is until I put in my details of my choosing, right? I put in my lead information, right? There's a ton of them, which makes it tough. Actually, I'm not sure if I went to Canadian. Yeah, I included a Canadian one here, right? So Canadian, so that's, Kijiji is eBay Motors in Canada, the equivalent. So an eBay company. And then the other aspect is, you know, you're not going to win in those areas, right? Going in there and outspending your peers and all that stuff, everybody's been trying to do the same thing, right? It's like everybody's trying to get that one person. So you're all clamoring for that one buyer, right, inevitably you end up running into some roadblocks. And that's typically the competitor. So dynamic search is kind of a cool thing that's come into play in the last while. And there's lots of varying opinions within dynamic search. We don't actually do anything to do with dynamic search. We didn't find that there was enough technological value that we could add to the equation, right? Dynamic search is really a Google thing, or likely a Bing thing. I'm not sure. I'm not one of those kind of 15% that's in the Bing world. But you know, the reality is you get into this mode, you get your inventory all organized, upload it into the Google machine, and you can start to create programs that will dynamically decide what inventory to show the consumer relative to what they're searching, right? So typically, your SEM team member has to rack their brain for a month or more and continue to be very active with it. That doesn't mean you can park it when you do this. You still have to work at it and, you know, all the positive and negative words and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is it makes it significantly easier to show the consumer a VIN and to enable that click to go to the vehicle detail page, right? So you can set it up. It can show that F-150 in Surrey. So Surrey is just quite near where we are in Vancouver. And it can click you right over to that vehicle. Okay, pretty cool. Right on. So all sorts of folks that can help you with that. Great agencies in the marketplace. Agencies at the OEM level, typically larger organizations like OMD and a few others. You know, that's the way to go. Pros and cons. So lots of pros, right? Lots of great things to enable that program, right? There's some debate whether it works better for new or used. Jury's still out, frankly, right? So it's worth exploring. But this is important. Right? It's not something you're going to get off the couch and say, hey, I want to try this SEM game and jump right into dynamic inventory search. Right? It's tougher. So I do recommend working with a partner. Okay, and then this is in more to our world. So dynamic inventory advertising, where you can figure out what a consumer is interested in specifically and show them the precise units that are the best fit with what you've got in inventory. Right? Makes really, really good sense. So to be able to automatically load the inventory into the system, so typically through a feed when it's from a larger site, so the larger organizations that we support at the OEM level, right? It's a feed that's coming direct from their own system. We get that inventory into our system, and you know, there's other forms of dynamic inventory out there. But find the shopper that's looking for the cars that you have, and that's where things are going to differentiate, is based on a data management platform. And I'm not going to go all the way down the path of explaining our data management platform, but effectively we built it from the ground up specifically for automotive at a very high degree of granularity. So our relationship for years and years with AutoTrader and the other endemic sites, we learn a lot when we live on their sites, and we have these triggers within the ads that are plentiful, like close to 100 decision-making parameters that you can decide which piece of inventory to come in. When you're living in the World Wide Web, you need to have a DMP to be able to do the same thing. You need your own data source to be able to be as accurate and effective, right? So it makes a big difference. So let's look at these guys again and consider for a second, okay, we want to get, in certain cases, we really want to get that branding message out there. That's important to us as a CPO leader, right? So I'm going to do campaigns like this, and I'm going to do inventory campaigns. Or you can even do campaigns that will initially display the branding and then display the inventory, right? So you get your branding message. It's like, hey, here's what's up. CPO program, great warranty, a few seconds, and then dissolve nicely to inventory, right? Inventory that's highly targeted to that consumer, right? So a fun play. Certainly our world, but frankly, your agency is where we tend to encourage people to go. Our model isn't to build a big old sales force. It's to work with very large organizations and to support smaller organizations through our partners. On the pros and cons, this is a proactive approach to the marketing, right? I talk about it often as reverse engineering search, right? In search, it's actually a passive effort. A consumer is coming to the Google machine, putting in details, and then you're saying, oh, that's the one I want to target. I'm going to serve that ad. I'm going to pay this much. It's all going to be great. When we're talking about this, we're actually hunting out in the marketplace, right? You're enabling your system, your dynamic inventory, to go out and find consumers in the marketplace. On endemic sites, learn more about them. Obviously, we run on lots and lots and lots of automotive sites, but then you're able to find them elsewhere because of the data that you've got. So another world, right? Lately, Facebook has come into play with all sorts of dealer solutions, inventory-based solutions, solutions that, you know, and when I talk about dealer solutions, I think oftentimes we look at the overarching world of OEM advertising, and we consider all of these different things that we have done and would typically do, but there's significant learning from that tier 3 fighter, right, that's at store level, and trying to make it happen at that level. The level of competition when you get into inventory is really tight. So a lot of these tools are focused on dealers, but could certainly support on the CPO side. And really the nice piece, you know, similar make model, so you're able to, within the regular Facebook environment, and I'll show you a bit of an enhancement to this world in a second, but being able to communicate those specific units again. It's really all about being able to put that specific unit in front of the consumer. And of course on your pros and cons, right? So make model level, targeting inventory, take advantage of the vibrant ecosystem. I mean, there's no denying Facebook's ecosystem. There's no denying how powerful that environment can be for all of us. Scalability is difficult. There are limitations. And in fact, if you roll over to Facebook with a CPO program and a huge amount of inventory, it may be pretty tough for the typical methodology to function, right? So working with a partner might be easier. It's certainly the case, as we've learned, with large dealer organizations that have up to 100 stores and more, right? It makes it difficult to just funnel that information in and run that program, right? Typically the stores, you know, you can, with a regular Facebook account, I think you can set up something like maybe 25 different stores, and then it maxes out, right? So to be able to do that a little differently. Not perfect for all pre-owned, performance varies by partner. I might actually be going overtime, check me out. So the other aspect here, and it's one that we've just introduced, and excited to get out and do some press on this in the next little while, and that's being able to learn in our network, so we have our proprietary network with all of our publishers, to be able to learn what consumers are interested in from there, and then target those folks in Facebook, right? What that does is it enables us to say, hey, all of those people, so we've got our native network is very performant in that the click-through rate is extremely high, but that means that there's still, you know, it's a 2% click-through rate on display, that's fabulous, right? But that still means there's 98 people who didn't click. Well, now being able to pursue them in that environment is particularly exciting, right? Being able to find that consumer in that space and target them in a different way is great. So, how am I? I'm going way over, am I?
Yeah, got it.
All right. Well, look, I will jam through this. I want to share, this is super awesome stuff that's just going to blow your mind, but we're going to zing through it, to a quick case study. And I'll just do one, because some friends from Kia are here, and I'll go over some Kia numbers from Kia Canada, right? And I'll end it with that. So, similar to many programs, right, there's all sorts of pieces around the Kia Canada program, and actually now we've got extra guests in the back of the room, so it's even better. So with this program, you know, it's all of those things we've talked about, right? So being able to get out there and communicate, have that growth, but continue to do all of those things. The problems that we're being faced, right? Past success starts to wane, want to show greater support to the dealer program. So when you get into showing the consumer the specific piece of inventory that you have in the program, I think dealers like that, right? Pretty clear that when you're showing off their inventory in market, they're going to appreciate that. So by doing that and getting into this program, being able to, of course, increase click-through rate, but more importantly, what's happening after the click? So generally speaking, and actually let's focus on this one here. So generally speaking, someone coming into the Kia Canada CPO environment, only 0.2 people would see a car, right? When you bring them to the car, they look at that car and more. right? Pretty straightforward. That translates into, actually, we'll look at this slide because it's a little more indicative of the program. So being able to suddenly add a significant amount of viewability on those specific cars. So as opposed to hoping that someone's going to look at the program after looking at that branded ad and find their way to a car, when you instead can say, here's that particular unit, go check it out, you make a big difference. Whether that's with search, whether that's with Facebook, or whether that's with dynamic inventory display. So we'll just jam through this real quick. There's what we've talked about. So getting into the benefits of obviously used cars, focusing more attention on CPO, and really encouraging that focus throughout your organization, right? Understanding that consumer, figuring out the ways that are going to gain their attention by focusing on units, by focusing on inventory versus just the program. As we see with the studies, the benefits of the program are secondary to wanting that vehicle and that model, right? And then the last piece is, as a part that we skipped over, there's so much translation of benefit between new activity, used activity, and CPO activity. So when you're working on your programs, make sure you consider what your dealer's doing. You can probably learn from some of the tactics they're employing. And vice versa, when you're getting into your pre-owned, you can get into what you can do with the CPO world as well. So look, I've taken more of your time than I'm allotted. I appreciate your attention. And if you've got any questions along the way, I am typically fairly easy to track down, though not entirely. But you know, via LinkedIn or via my phone or email, I'd love to hear from you. Or any questions after the session here, I'll go to the back.